Welcome, John. How are you today?
Doing good. Good. Glad to be here.
For everyone here, we got John from Bulldog Mindset. Pretty popular on YouTube. You're growing on TikTok and all social media platforms. Maybe know him from Simple Programmer as well. John, you want to introduce yourself and your channel, a little bit, what it's about?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm John Sonmez. My channel is Bulldog Mindset. And so I really teach personal development for men, really getting rid of the victim mindset. The Bulldog mindset is the opposite of the victim mindset. So my whole goal is to teach men how to be men today and how to develop themselves from a fitness standpoint, from a finances standpoint, and from a relationships and dating standpoint, so they can, be successful and be what I call a top 5% man.
Top 5% man. Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, as as someone who grew up in today's world, there's lots of screwed up stuff with men these days. I've watched a lot of your stuff. So it's it's shocking how some men are, and I was one of those guys, and I'm getting better and better by the day. I don't know if I'm a 5% man, but I'm trying to get there for you. So a part of that was obviously about financial independence. And I mentioned I watched a crap ton of your videos, and a lot of your videos were about real estate investing, because that was one of the ways you built your wealth over time. So I'd love it if you dove in a little bit into where you were before and the story behind your first investment property.
Yeah, so sure. So, I mean, with me, it's kind of interesting. When I first started investing in real estate, I didn't really know what I was doing. I wasn't planning on being a real estate investor. Basically, I just wanted to not pay rent. Okay, so I bought my first house when I was 19 years old. And again, a lot of people say, oh, you must have been rich. No, I was a broke college student. My dad was enlisted Air Force. He was not even an officer. My mom didn't work. I was going to a state school at the time. And really, I just had this idea in my mind that I didn't want to pay for rent. But it just seemed like a bad idea. I was like, well, can I buy something? And I don't know what caused me to get that idea in my head, but it turned out to be a good one. And so, at 19, obviously I didn't have any money. I was going to college, maybe a couple $1,000s in my name. And I didn't have a big budget for buying property. I had no credit score, no credit history. And so what I did was, I talked to a realtor, and all the realtors I talked to were basically like, yeah, there's no way, there's nothing. I mean, you're not gonna be able to buy a house. And, there's nothing in the price range that you want anyway. And so I finally talked to this one realtor, and I told him my price range was like under $100,000. And this is back, 20 years ago. But still, that was a cheap house,
Yeah.
And so he showed me a few properties. Finally, he found this one property. In fact, he tried to convince me to buy a duplex at the time, which I should have listened to him. But I wasn't really trying to invest in real estate. But anyway, he showed me this one property that was $68,000, this bungalow type of cottage style house built in 1900. And, that's what I could afford. So I got into contract to buy it. But the problem I had was that I couldn't get a mortgage on it, right? So I talked to all these lenders, and he was like, yeah, you're not going to be able to, you have no credit history, nothing. And at that time, this is like 2000, like the year 2000, interest rates are like 8-9%, so it's
not what they are today.
Yeah, nothing close to what they are today. So finally I found this one lender that was like, okay, we can do a loan for you, without any credit history. And they're like, but you're going to have a 3-year prepayment penalty, which most people don't even know what that is, because most loans, that's an unheard of. It's like, it's a predatory lending practice. So basically you can't pay off the loan for 3 years. If you pay it off early, you have to pay a penalty for paying off the loan early. So you can't refinance or anything. And they gave me like a 13% interest rate.
Wow.
But I got the property, right? So I ended up getting the property. I ended up getting like a loan from my parents for a couple grand. I scraped together a couple grand, and I ended up coming in with, I think it was like maybe like 5% down, getting the first mortgage, getting a second mortgage for the other 15%. And yeah, I held that property I just sold it last year. And so I held it for almost 20 years.
So you definitely appreciate it over the 20 years then, right?
Yeah, because I bought it for 68,000, and then I believe I sold it for, I want to say 160 or 170.
That's the power of time working on your side right there.
Yeah.
All right, so that's there's a few things in there. First, you were 19, because that's huge. A lot of people are like, how do I do it? I'm in college. How do I do it now? And granted, that was 20 years ago, and you did buy in a very cheap area, but you found a way to do it. That's the most important part. The second thing was you also didn't have a lot of money. So a lot of people, especially on TikTok, don't have a lot of money and are young. So for those people, what would you tell them to do given today? You know, they might give the excuses that 20 years ago that was easier. What would you tell them to do today?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it was easier, some ways it wasn't. Remember, so like you said, I didn't have a lot of money. Interest rates were high. They were like 9%. I mean, that makes it a lot harder to buy a house, right? Like it was harder to get credit, to get mortgages back then. Also, there was no internet. Like there was literally no internet.
I didn't even think about that.
So it was not like I could just watch videos that like someone could, like I had to figure out all of this on my own. Like there was no one to tell me any of this stuff. So in some ways it was easier, but in a lot of ways it was harder. So what I'd say today though is, in the US at least, there's a first-time home buyers thing where you can put a very low down payment. I think it's like 3% on your property.
Okay. Yeah, 3.5.
So I would definitely take advantage of that. I mean, be careful. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you should buy a bigger, like when you buy a house, like if you're going to live in, and you have to for the first-time home buyers. I think you only have to live there for like a year or so.
1 year.
Yeah. So at least from a legal perspective, but
we won't talk about the non-legal perspective here.
Yeah, but regardless, you should buy a house that if you did leave in a year, you could rent it out and it would pay the mortgage or pretty damn close to paying the mortgage, right? So don't do something stupid just because you have that. But yeah, with that, I mean, that's huge. Like it doesn't, anyone who's really serious about buying a property can save up the 3.5% that they need, and you don't have to buy something big, right? You can buy something small. You can buy something that's not super expensive. I mean, it depends on what market you're in, but there's usually options, and there's other options too, like house hacking options, right? So when I was buying that first house in Boise, Idaho, one of the options I considered, which probably would have even been smarter, was to buy a property over $100,000, like a nice brand new 4-bedroom house, and then rent the rooms to my friends, right? So that would have been a perfect option, right? Because that would have allowed me to pay the mortgage on it and to have a bigger house. So that's another option, right? So maybe you can't really afford to pay the mortgage on a couple $100,000 house, but you can house hack and you can rent out the rooms to your friends, right? And again, if you want to put in the effort to save that money, it's if you want to buy the house, you got to put in the effort to do that. And then as far as getting a loan and stuff, you should already be working on your credit, right? So have a couple of credit cards that you pay off every month, right? If you have a car payment or something like that, try to build up that credit history so that it'll help you for the loan. But it's easier to get loans nowadays, I would say, than it was back then too. So, but yeah, I mean, that's what I would say for basic advice. It's if you believe you can do it, right? It's all, again, going back to my story, I had to figure out some way, right? Everyone was telling me there's no way you can do this. And I said, well, there's got to be a way. And so, if you have the grit to stick it out and the perseverance to figure out how am I going to make this happen, then there's a way that you can make it happen.
Yeah. And it may involve calling 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 banks to figure out who the hell is going to actually lend to you at 19 with very little money. But yeah, you did it. And that's the most important part. And you got your foot in the door. And the one point I wanted to point out was that you didn't even want to invest, right? So you didn't even rent these out by the room. You just ended up paying the mortgage yourself while you're living there.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a small little 2-bedroom house. I mean, the mortgage payment was like $400 or $500, I think, a month. Maybe at that time it was like more like 6 or 7 because I was paying the ridiculous 13% interest rate. But eventually I refinanced it
Sounds like you're a little
and
salty about that 13% interest rate.
yeah, but it was good. It was worth doing anyway. Plus also like there's other ways to finance, right? I mean, you could, if you're really, if you couldn't get a loan, you could always go to different sellers and you could try to get seller financing. See if they'll carry back, the loan and do something like that where you don't have to have a traditional lender. So.
Yeah, exactly. The options are out there. It's a matter of combining the different options, whether it's using seller's concessions or 3.5% down or down payment assistance programs that the government will pay your, loan for. But so then where was the shift from I'm living in a house to I am investing then?
Yeah. So basically what happened was after I bought this house, I got this really good job. And this was like during the .com bubble. So I was a software developer and I got this job for Xerox, right? This contract job that I was woefully unqualified for. It was like $75 an hour. So here I am, $75 an hour. A lot of it's per diem because I'm working out of state. So almost like making like 150, 160 grand a year. And so I left the house, right? Packed up all my shit in my Geo Metro, drove down to Santa Monica, California. And, this is at 19. And I thought, okay, I'm rich, right? I'm making 160 grand as a 19-year-old, how can you do better than this? And then, so I'm sitting there in my little apartment there, like, which was sparse, right? Because I was like, I'm going to save every penny I have for this job. So I was literally going to Stack and Save and buying macaroni and cheese and living in this little tiny apartment in Santa Monica while I was making 160 grand a year because I wanted to save and I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor. All right. But I started doing the math in my spreadsheet. I'm like, all right, how long will it take me to become a millionaire? Right. And so I was like, well, if I can save every penny, if I have this tax break here, somehow if I can save $100,000 a year, that was my goal, right? Sleep on this mattress on the floor, I was like, okay, for 10 years, if I can save $100,000 a year, then I'll have $1 million. I'll be a millionaire, right? And then I was like, that's not even really rich. And that's 10 years. And then I was like, oh shit, I didn't factor in inflation. So with inflation, you're talking about 13 years, maybe 14 years to have $1 million of real value in the future dollar value, right? And so I'm like, okay, so this is what I have to do is like, I have to keep this job, save every penny I can for 13 or 14 years. And then I can finally be a millionaire, which again, you're not set for life. I was like, this is crazy. How could anyone do this? Because I thought, okay, I mean, maybe I could make a little bit more money, but what am I going to make? Like $300,000 a year? No way. No software developer, at least at that time, is going to make that kind of money. I was already kind of at the top of the game. I was like, how can anyone do this? Even if you're a lawyer or a doctor, you're not going to make a lot more than that much money. So how does anyone get rich? And so that's where I started looking into how do people get rich in the United States? And it kept on coming back to real estate. It's kind of funny at that time, remember, this is 20 years ago. I found Donald Trump. Actually, I read his books back then, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
Because he was one of the classic stories of wealth in his family, right? His dad actually owned some tenement buildings, these dilapidated apartments and stuff, but he became rich through doing that. And so I realized that every single person, just about every rich family, became rich through real estate. And that's when I started studying real estate. So then I actually bought this book. And it's still my favorite real estate book. It's called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. It's by Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams. Mm-hmm. And in that book, it had like charts, spreadsheets that showed you exactly if you bought a property, in this much time, this is how much money you'll make. And I was like, this makes sense to me. Like, this is the clear way, better than trying to invest in the stock market, better than anything else, that if I just follow this plan and I just buy one property a year, every year, that in 15 years guaranteed, I'll be wealthy. I could even sell the first property that I bought and then just continue the cycle. Or worst case scenario, I could wait 20 or 30 years, have them all paid off, and then I'd be rich. So that was basically what got me into investing.
Okay. So then when you were in Santa Monica, did you start buying properties there or what'd you do?
I didn't buy properties there. It was too expensive. I wish I had bought properties there at that time. I thought it was too expensive. At that time, they were really cheap, actually. So yeah, but what I ended up doing was I ended up moving back to Boise, Idaho, and a few years later, basically about 2 years later, and that's where I bought. As soon as I got back to Boise, Idaho, I bought this duplex. Is townhouse that was attached. So I bought one side of the townhouse, which was a great rental property, and I lived in it. Well, I still had that other rental property, and then I immediately bought the other side of the townhouse, which was matching, basically making it a duplex, and I rented that out. And then every year from then on forward, I started buying one property.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now 20 years later, like what percentage of I don't know if your wealth or what does your portfolio look like as a whole as a real estate investor?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I had some different twists and turns, right? I haven't done things as optimized as I should have done. Because what I did was initially, I bought all the properties with a 30-year fixed mortgage, which was great. But at one point I wanted to retire young. And so I decided that I was going to take all the money I was making from my business and things like that and start paying off my properties instead of staying leveraged. Like, early on, it's better to be leveraged. Like if you want to build wealth, you need leverage, because leverage appreciation is the best way to make money in real estate. That's really where you make the most money from. And so, initially I was benefiting from that. But at some point when I was like, oh, I want to retire, I wanted to pay it all off and have passive income. So right now what I'm sitting on is about probably somewhere close to $4.5 million worth of real estate that's all paid off. So I get income coming in every month, about $15,000 a month of income on that real estate. But
and you can leverage that money again to buy more properties or take it out as a loan for your business or whatever you need it for.
Exactly. Yeah. I could tap into all that credit if I wanted to. Right now I'm not touching it because I'm just taking the new money that I have and I'm going to invest that and leverage that money. This is kind of a safety net, to be like, all right, no matter what happens, I've got this income coming in every month. So again, it's not ideal, right? Ideally, I would be fully leveraged on that money. And instead of having $4.5 million, let's say $4 million to make it an easy number. Instead of having $4 million of paid off real estate, I would have $20 million with $4 million in equity, right? Because I could be leveraged, or maybe I could be leveraged at 4x. So so it'd be $20 million, right? So
yeah, you would be able to, if it was 20% or 25% in each one, it'd be $16 to $20 million, somewhere around there. That's
exactly. Yeah, 16.
And all of that would be making you cash flow and building leverage and appreciation and loan pay down and tax benefits up the wazoo. So you'd be in a really good state. Okay, so so you invested all of your properties in Boise then, or did you start spreading out and diversifying around the nation?
Yeah, so primarily I'm split between Boise, Idaho, and Kansas City, Missouri. And I picked those markets. Well, Boise I lived in, but at the time it also happened to be a really good cash flowing market, right? Whereas when I talk about that, it's basically cap rate, right? So cap rate is really the thing I look for. It's the, essentially the price to rent ratio, right? So I want to have properties that have a high rent compared to their price. So Boise at that time qualified. Right now it doesn't, because a lot of Californians have moved there and jacked up the prices. And Kansas City also was a really great market for that. It's also raised a lot in price. So that's primarily why I stick with those markets or continue to invest in Boise, investing in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing everywhere. I mean, here in Austin, this is like where the Californians go, and they're just making the home prices. Like the other day, I offered on a house. It was asking $299. It sold for $380. Like, whoa! My offer was going to be $340, hoping that it would appraise at that price, but instead it sold at $380. I was like, there's no way in hell that this actually appraises for $380. They better be coming to the table with 50, 60K cash. It's crazy. So anyway, all right. What was the number one lesson that you learned when buying your first few investment properties?
That's a good question. Number one lesson that I learned. Okay. I would say what matters the most is the numbers. Don't worry about the appearance of the property, right? The numbers is what matters, right? So, because I've bought brand new properties that had more things wrong with them than properties that are 50 years old. You know, you got to get it checked out, get a home inspection, obviously. But if the numbers work on the property, don't worry about cosmetic issues, right? In fact, usually your best deals are going to be properties that have a lot of cosmetic issues because the perceived value is less. But the actual value when you're a real estate investor is the utility value of that. Like how much money does that asset produce, right? And that's the thing to really look at. I mean, you obviously have capital expenditure, if you've got maintenance in the property, things like that to take into account. But the biggest thing that I learned was that, because I bought this one fourplex, you know, one of my early investments in Boise, I bought this fourplex. It was purple and yellow. It was like separate buildings. Like I think there was a duplex, like a 2-story building, and then 2 like cottages that were separate. And it was all like purple and yellow paint. It looked dilapidated. It was just looked horrible, the property. But because it was so horrible looking, the list price was $265 at the time for this fourplex. And I put an offer in at $235, and the seller accepted the offer at $235, right? And so so, you know, I did some work to fix it up. I held on to the property for about a year. And later on, after about a year later, my real estate agent came back to me and was like, hey, I've got an investor that wants to buy your property for $300,000. And so I ended up just flipping it, selling it about a year later for $300,000. But, you know, it was scary. It was scary to see the property because it just looked so bad. And you have to put that aside. And the numbers worked, right? The numbers worked. I checked the rents, everything worked. And I knew it was a good deal. And so, you know, you got to look for things that you know are good deals.
Yeah. One of the like questions I get all the time is like, oh, is a fourplex a good deal? Is a condo, or is a townhome, or is an apartment, or like, I'm just like, that doesn't matter. As long as it produces cash flow, that's what matters. Some condos will, some condos won't. Some triplexes do. They tend to, on average, more, but that doesn't mean that it will 100%.
It's funny because people are like, oh, well, I heard that condos don't appreciate as much, or multifamilies don't appreciate as much as single families. And I'm like, that can't be true, because like, just use some logic here. Because if that were true over time, what would happen to the difference between the prices? Like, you would have single home values go so high, and then the rest of the properties go so low that it'd be a no-brainer that why would anyone ever buy a single family? Like it might at times when the market's hot, maybe single families appreciate first, but everything has to balance out. It doesn't matter what the property type is, right? Otherwise you'd have over time these big differentials between the two, and you don't see that. You see relatively, when you look at from a cash flow perspective, right, what cap rates are. Cap rates are generally the same. Maybe single families have lower cap rates on higher end stuff, but you know, in general, it all goes up along the same line. So,
and one shoot, I had a pretty solid question. All right, let's just wrap it up with this then. Knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently to start? Like, knowing that investing was actually going to make you wealth, would you have started differently?
I'm trying to think. Well, I mean, there were a few things I would have done differently. So one of them is that I would have hired property management company from the beginning and not try to manage it myself. That cost me a lot of money and headaches. And I almost stopped investing in real estate because of that. Because I was like, if this is what real estate investing is, this sucks. There's no way I don't want to do this. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, is that I might have even tried to be more aggressive and buy more properties per year than just one, if I could swing it, and not to be too afraid of lower down payments on the properties. Just knowing what I know now. In general, though, I tend to give people the advice to stick to a 20% down payment. I feel like that's usually going to produce you a good cash flow and be a solid way to invest. But I'm trying to think if there's one of the things I would say. I don't know. I think those are the main things I would say.
Okay, hold up. I remembered the question was,
Okay.
you recommend someone who's about to go to college, because I get this question a lot, is I'm about to go to college. Should I just try to go into real estate, or should I go to college and get a job? And by go into real estate, they mean doing wholesaling, becoming an agent, or invest right away with like maybe their parents' money. I think I know how you're going to answer, but
Uh, yeah, I don't like the idea of going straight into real estate because the thing is, again, I talk about two hats a lot of time. Like you have to have the investor hat and then the sort of worker hat. You know, like if you do wholesaling and you do like flipping of properties, it's a total different. Like you're just being paid by the hour for your time, right? Because whatever profit that you make, you can just take that profit and divide it by how many hours it took you to make that profit, right? So whether that's wholesaling, whether you do a fix and flip or whatever it is. And so to me, you know, if you really want to maximize your real estate investment, obviously like knowing something about the market, maybe getting a real estate license, that's not hard to do. You can do that as a side thing as well. But I would rather see you make more money. Go become a software developer and make a six-figure income and take that money invested into real estate, right? Or build a business and make, you know, or do both of those things. And, you know, you're not going to get a major advantage like doing other real estate stuff that's harder to get traction on. And I mean, if you really love real estate, that's the whole thing that you're into, then sure. But I think from an efficiency standpoint, making, you know, getting a job at Facebook is going to allow you to buy more real estate and invest than trying to be a wholesaler or flipper. You know, there's stories of people that do that. Obviously, some people are successful at it, but it's going to be a whole lot of work to
to
do
sum
that
it
and get
up,
that going.
like get a high paying job or a high source of income, even if it's from a business, and then use that for real estate rather than just diving into real estate in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, because you need money, and you're not
Yeah,
going to have money, you know, doing the real estate type of jobs.
got to come from somewhere. That's what I say.
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
low down payment options, but it's got to come from somewhere. All right,
Yeah.
John. Where is the best place for someone to check you out if they want to check you out?
BulldogMindset.com. Just go on there and take the quiz. There'll be a pop-up that comes up that asks if you want to take the Bulldog quiz to find out what your Bulldog score is. Of course, you do 0 to 100. I'll tell you your score. I'll send you some information on how to improve that score. So BulldogMindset.com.
BulldogMindset.com. You got it, guys. Check that out and take that quiz and see what your results are. See how much of a man you are.
That's right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.